Good morning, everyone. My name is Kuok, and I'm the Head of Professional Practices and Community at the Institute for HR Professionals, for short, IHRP for short. Welcome to the IHRP Qualtrics joint hosted webinar entitled Building a Resilient and Adaptive Workforce in Southeast Asia. It is our pleasure to partner with Qualtrics on this webinar as it gives us the privilege to get a sneak peek review on their latest global research findings. This new global research from Qualtrics shares insights on workforce aspects from their organization as we shift into the new normal and to the new better. Steve Bennetts, later on from Qualtrics, will share more insights on his presentation. We're also very fortunate that we managed to get two of our IHRP master professionals, DN Prasad from GovTech and Ms. Justina from Changi Airport Group to join us today, as well as a special guest speaker from the Kuok Group, Ms. Melissa Key. Our IHRP-CP, Ms. Shane Yan from Growthbeans, will also be helping us moderate the panel and open the Q&A later. Now, before I pass on to Steve to share the Qualtrics research data, let me just cover some of the housekeeping rules to help you get familiarized with this webinar platform. So in this platform, you might see that there's actually multiple little windows open, and you can move these windows at any time. And to enlarge them, just click on the upper right-hand corner to maximize the screen. You may have to scroll a little bit in case the fit is a bit wider than your normal screen. This webinar will be recorded, so rest assured, we will be making the webinar available on demand for viewing within 1 week post this session. For Q&A, for some of you, if you can just look at the bottom of the console, you see a little tab for Q&A. That's where you can actually type in your questions for the panelists when it comes to mind later as you're listening to them do their sharing. And then lastly, just a quick reminder, all the presentation materials are actually copyrighted. As I mentioned, this is a sneak peek preview. So please do refrain from taking snapshots. We will avail the presentation slides to you post the webinar. Thank you in advance for your kind understanding. Now, let me briefly introduce Stephen so you get to know a little bit more about your presenter. Steve Bennetts is the head of EX Solutions and Strategy at Qualtrics, or APJ, and he leads a team of specialists in guiding organizations to optimize their employee experience at every point of the employee life cycle. He's one of the region's most experienced employee experience specialists, having played a crucial role in launching and developing the experience management category in APJ. He specializes in employee experience and human-centered technologies. Now, prior to joining Qualtrics, Steve was the GM of Innovations and Client Services at Chandler McLeod, and before that worked as a principal consultant at Centis. He's a passionate psychologist and utilizing the crossover space between creativity, psychology, with digital technologies to create a positive experience for our workforce. Thank you to Qualtrics for your partnership and support. So Steve, over to you to take us through your slides. Thanks.
Thanks, Karina, and thank you for those kind words and introduction. It has been a pleasure the last decade or so looking at the employee experience whole industry grow from engagement into how we actually manage experiences in the workplace. And we're thrilled to be partnering here today on this webinar. And I do want to just give you a bit of a sneak peek at some of the data and research that we've been conducting over the last 3 to 4 months around how we can actually think about working different. And so we're really kind of thinking about the hypothesis around how can we actually reimagine the way of employee experience. And I think one of the really neat things that's occurred for everyone is that COVID has actually created this accelerant on the digital transformation within our employee experience programs. Rather than just being a disruptor, it's allowed us to fast track a lot of these different processes or listening posts or even just moving to a digital platform that we hadn't previously been able to do, or we were struggling to get the momentum within the business. And there's this great quote here from the team at the World Economic Forum where they were referring to and looking at the fact that for any business right now, digitalizing and creating digital transformations is absolutely critical to allow the continuity of business going forward, especially during these times like COVID and pandemic. But going forward, there's just going to be a need to be digitally ready at all times. And this is no surprise, because as we're seeing across organizations, we're seeing that the world has changed forever. And that you're seeing organizations like Twitter, Salesforce, etc., either extending out their remote work force or sitting there and saying, look, it's going to happen. We're going to stay remote until mid next year, etc. And so that means we need to think differently about the way we're constructing our employee experiences, and also not just those in a digital or at home space. Like it's about those employees on site, and those who are going on site are experiencing a very different on-site experience than what they had pre-COVID. So it's something for us to think about as we're bearing in mind what does the new world look like? What does that mean for us? And in particular, what we want to be thinking about is thinking about what is our goal. And so for us at Qualtrics, this is a great quote from Ryan Smith, our CEO and founder at Qualtrics, from our Work Different conference that occurred just a few weeks back. He made this very key point, and this is something that we do dearly value, is that the goal for us shouldn't really be getting back to normal, right? Or even discover just a new normal. What we really should be doing, and our goal should be, how do we actually build the new better? And the new better for us is about how do we fundamentally reinvent the workplace? How do we challenge the paradigms, the way workplaces were built, and the way that we actually operate within the workplace? And we need to think differently about that, and we can create what we call, or we're referring to as the new better. And so for that, we went out and did some large-scale research, and it's something that we're doing very ongoing for us. And I want to share with you some of that research, but we're also going to have a white paper released in the next few weeks that's going to be looking at the Work Different philosophy and what's happening in that space. So for what we see here, we're looking at this data through an industry lens, which is the key aspect of this research, because when we look at across the globe, industries have gone through different journeys over the last 6 months. If I look at our retail, our travel, hospitality, they've had significant disruptions in how they go about doing business, where, say, our tech world and software space hasn't gone through a significant disruption in relation to what's happened in the last 6 months. So that's why we've taken the industry slant, but we've also looked at so I've broken this down through some key regional areas as well. This study was fielded between July and August this year, and we had a panel of employees across the Asia-Pacific, Europe, North America space. In particular, there was about 7,500 employees that were either furloughed or temporarily furloughed, or were currently working. So when we look at all these studies, we find that these results are significantly significant, and that there's the standard industry standard around the margin of error. So let's get in and have a look at what we need to explore. And I think there's 4 fundamental questions each of us need to be thinking about when we want to create this new normal, or this new better, sorry. We want to be thinking about this notion of experience gaps. And so for us at Qualtrics, this is what we live and breathe, trying to understand through experience management, what are those experiences our people are having, and what are the gaps that are occurring, either if it's an employee experience, looking at the gaps in, say, their employee journey from onboarding through to exit. Maybe there's a promotion cycle that's happening. What's those experiences like, and how that's impacting on productivity or business outcomes? Now, it's not just the discipline employee experience, there's also customer experience, brand, and product experience that make up the 4 key pillars of employee experience. And so for us, we want to be looking at and understanding as we're going through this data, what are those experience gaps that we do need to be aware of that our employees face? What are the changes we can make to make people feel and be more productive? What are the positive lessons that we can learn from this COVID experience? Because there are lessons everywhere. And what does the employee experience look like in this new better? I'm going to give you a taste of that across the industries in relation to what our people that we surveyed experienced and what their thoughts are going forward. So before we get into it, I've got some really great quotes that I think are just really get us focused around and inspired. And this one's great from Oris Stewart from the MBA. And he sat there and said these great words, which is, don't be paralyzed by the fear, but lean into the moment and use your energy to innovate, create these new opportunities. And that's the opportunities we have now. So let's use this data to think different, to get energized and create some new opportunities. So in the data, we looked across three kind of core areas. One is how much since the pandemic started, and let's use the earmark of around March for the globe, and we know in Asia it was more January. But for us, we asked the question around the time span of since this started. So what we wanted to look across was three key areas, which is how valued employees have felt during this time and what's been that catalyst for that. We've also wanted to look at, well, how much is actually actioning off the back of the data that's potentially being collected. And then finally, what do people believe the experience gaps are or experiences going to look like going forward in their industries in the future? And so in this first bit of data here, we really wanted to look at how well people felt valued by their current employer during this time. And I must say, not just through this data, but anecdotally through all the customer conversations I've had, those organizations that did pivot, those organizations that did use this as an accelerant and reached out and listened to their employees had a significant difference in their results over time. And so we found that 54% of employees felt they were really proud to work for the organization that they worked at. They felt more proud. I'm only looking there at a scale of 5 and the top end of that rating scale. If I add in where people felt they felt moderately amount of pride since the beginning for their organization, that adds this score up to being about 86%. So it's staggering how much pride people are feeling for their organization, which is great. And in addition to that, we've got 57% of people are really happy with the organization's response to COVID. And overall, we've got 48% of employees were feeling more valued by their employer since the beginning of COVID-19. What does this mean? This means that all the energy and work that you've been doing, and let's just broadly put this across us in HR, the work you've been doing to help understand your people and to help them adapt to what's going on, it's paying dividends here, and it's fantastic to see. Likewise, if we look at whether people are actually using their employees' input during this time, this is fantastic to see. And it's a data set that we see time and time again over the last year or so, where people truly believe it's important for us to gather their feedback. And it's not just gathering their feedback about what's going on, because now we need to look at going back to work. So 3/4 of the participants said it was really important for their employer to gather their feedback about what actions they wanted to see to make them feel confident to return to work. So those that were working remote. And so it's important to get their feedback. And likewise, 44% of employees believe that they're more productive since that original work group. So that's the important around that. There are signs of productivity. I will also add that when we look at the results around how productive people are, when you also add the extra category, which is I'm just as productive as before, that blows the score out to being up to 85%. So there's a significant proportion of people feel like this change has either not disrupted them in their productivity or it's actually increased their ability to be more productive. And likewise, the communication between the leadership and employees has significantly improved. And we've seen the reason why that's occurred. When I look across the 12,000 customers that we have here at Qualtrics, and there's been over 55,000 different projects sitting around our working remote pulses that we've been conducting. In that group, we see that the reason why a lot of organizations feel that it's improved is because they've increased their listening, and they've actually been pulsing maybe either once a week daily right back at the start, but now they've moved into more a regular occurrence, being every fortnight or once a month in that space. So the key call out here for us is when we're thinking about either returning back into the workforce, or even if you've gone back into the workforce, it's critical for us to reach out to our employees and get their feedback and help them feel like they're part of that journey. Going forward for things like listening and actions, and what are the kind of cool results we saw coming out from there. I think the key thing here is around the success and listening to people based on the data and outcomes that they've got. And we want to be focused on that. And so when we went through and we asked a series of 4 questions that was around, and I mentioned before that people have increased their frequency. This one was around just understanding what does that mean for the culture of engagement. And we looked at how much people had listened, where they actually felt like they weren't just listening, but their concerns were being heard, acting on, etc. We found in this first instance that 75% of employees believed it was important that their employee listen to their feedback. But then across the board, we saw these really nice demonstrations that people really truly believed that they should be listened to more. They should be, that their employer is actually listening to them more, they're concerned more, they're acting on the feedback, and they're doing a really good job about that. And it's, again, if I added in here these results, if I added in the bracket of the group that said, you know what, it's about the same as what we had previously, that pulls these results up significantly by about 30 to 35 points across. And you'll see in these results here, I'm now breaking this down into region. It actually increases that up significantly. So there's only about 20% of the workforce that reported that things have actually for us to think about there. If maybe you haven't reached out to your employees, but maybe it's the time now to actually start doing that and around that. I will call in the Asia Pacific group here, we're looking at about 2,500 employees, and the country groups there is Australia, we've got Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand covered in that space at the moment. One thing I will point out here is when we look at the Asia Pacific area, when we look, the results did demonstrate to us that they were significantly different to the rest of the regions. Now, this is a really interesting thing around why is that when we're looking at our results that our region is reporting a higher change than before, and that's different to North America and EMEA. So there's a couple of hypotheses out there with it that I have, and one of the key ones I wanted to raise with everybody is, you may not have seen it, but last year, Forrester released a really good state of play of what employee experience looks like in the Asia Pacific region. And Emmett wrote in there extensively about the fact that the EX maturity in Asia Pacific is low, but that's not from a want of actually going and driving and making the change. We just haven't taken that step yet to make the change. And so the nice little quote there from them in the report is, despite the significant interest in our region, we still have a low maturity around that change. Now, I just see this as potential opportunity. What do I mean by that? It means we could just leapfrog the maturity curve change that we've seen that North America and EMEA had to go through in the last 4 years around employee experience, where we can now use this time right now and go back to my original comments around using this as an accelerant. We can use this time to transform our employee listening programs and create an accelerant around that and just leapfrog the rest of the world. So it's something for us to think about in relation to that. I'm sure the panelists might have some different thoughts and feedback on their hypothesis on why we think we might be a higher scoring in this space, but it's something for us to consider and think about. The last things I want to talk about and go through is just note where people are going. And I think Ryan Smith, our CEO, has this another great quote that he mentioned in here, which is, measuring satisfaction is not the goal. All measurement does is tell us how many times we have to apologize. Success lies in taking action. And what are those actions that we think about when we want to return to the new better? And this slide here, I find interesting, and it's certainly within my my fellow organizational psychologist team and other scientists that we have at Qualtrics, we've been throwing around this slide, trying to think about what this actually means, because what we found when we're thinking and we challenged the group around, should we return to a new better? Well, 35% of participants agreed that the change that they've had has been for the better. Yet, 3/5 of the participants said that they expect a huge change in their industries, but 60% of employees want to return to the same routines as before. So when I look at these results, I find this a bit funny, because I think everyone's accepting that, hey, their industry is going to change, but they want to go back to their normal in their workplace. And I think there's a few hypotheses we can make there, whether that's thinking about attribution error or bias might be something to consider, or it could be as simple as people just haven't had the time yet to think about what's happening in their space personally, and they're just so customer focused about what's going on. But it is something for us to consider and think about when we're starting to build the confidence around what the new better might look like and getting people's input. Now, we've worked across a number of different areas, and I'm just going to touch on these different industries and the expectations there. We can go into a deep dive, as I mentioned before. There's a white paper coming out around the global results, and then papers on each of these different industries. If we haven't covered your industry here, don't worry, I've done a snapshot of a few of them. Or if we have covered it, it's okay. We're only going to go into a little bit of detail, but there's a lot of information for you to think about your own industry, what that means for your employees. But you're seeing here the travel and hospitality industry. There's a huge focus and expectation from our participants saying that personal hygiene and protective measures are critical for them, and they want to really see those changes happening. And they do expect to be a significant increase in cleanliness. They expect public spaces to change, and a greater contact in relation to their interactions, or a greater investment into contactless interactions. The retail industry, I mentioned before, has been disrupted, and I'm seeing that across the globe. And we've got 64% of workers believe their health is more important than their organization, which, just think about that for a moment, that your employees are thinking primarily about their health and not their organization. So there's a slight shift there in mindset. But certainly the changes that they expect to see is more investment towards their customer service of employees. They definitely agree that there's going to be more transactions happening online and a bigger uptake of delivery versus employee shopping. But one of the things they will say is that there will be a significant change in in the retail experience. And that's something for us all to think about. If you work in retail, we know that under experience management, that a lot of these major labels are actually moving towards experience centers. So you go in and experience, but then you do your shift behavior, and that would mean our type of employees that we might employ is something to be thinking about there. The one around in the technology industries, for that one, we definitely saw that a lot of them felt like going remote is great, and they expect that to change significantly than any other industry, and they want to keep employee experience as a priority, and they'll find that the innovation is a continued focus throughout this time. And then with the automobile industry, and if anyone hasn't seen it, there's some great case studies with people like Volkswagen, who moved the whole industry, or at least within Australia, moved the whole process into online when you go to purchase a car from a dealer. And so there are some significant changes even happening there within their workforce. But they felt that the whole industry's actually reacted well to this during this time, given how much there was uncertainty around the sales of cars going forward. And so they do see a shift between to touchless vehicle delivery to the end consumer. And again, think about how that changes the type of employees or the skill set required. And then they also looking at the online car sales as a significant shift. And this notion around remote or concierge services is critical there. The last industry I will focus on, because I've taken up enough time in these data points, the racial industry has reacted quite well. Again, they were able to pivot very quickly. And so people expect to see this increasedness or this increase around remote learning, and then a shift towards online and digital services, and agreed that there would be an increased focus on technology, and they expect the innovations to continue to benefit their customers as well. And you probably notice across all these industries, people are expecting a digitalization of their workforce. They're expecting online B2C to be very predominant for the next few years. And it's going to be critical for us in HR to think about what does that mean for our skill of our workforce, but even us in HR, what that means for our skills for us. So there's a bunch of different expectations that are changing, and it comes back to those curious questions that we want to have, which is, what are those experience gaps do employees face, the changes that we can make to make people feel more productive? What's the positive lessons that we can learn from studies like this, but also from your own studies you do in your own organization? The goal we want to get towards is it's time for us to build a new better. And for anyone that hasn't yet seen, we do have the Work Difference Conference on demand. There is over 25 different brands that are out there changing the world and changing the way we do things for the better. It's on demand. But as I mentioned, the white papers will be available for you, and we'll make sure you get copies of those as we're going forward. So I think it's really important now to hand over to Shane to help talk us through some of this data and where we're at. Shane, I know you've been sitting there patiently in the background. Why don't we pop you on and go from there?
Thank you very much, Steve. And good morning, everyone. I am Shane, co-founder of Growthbeans, a social enterprise that focuses on the self-awareness of people for their well-being, inclusivity, and employability. I'm happy to be here to moderate the panel discussion with a group of very experienced HR professionals. So apart from Steve Bennetts, whom you have just heard from, we have Melissa Key, Chief Human Resources Officer at Kuok, Singapore. She leads the group HR function headquartered in Singapore with responsibilities for diverse global operations across sectors such as maritime, property, and agri-solutions. We also have Justina Tan, the Managing Director of People for Changi Airport Group. In her role, she is responsible for the people operations and shaping the people culture of Changi Airport Group. And we also have Prasad. He is the Senior Director at GovTech Singapore, and admittedly a grateful public servant with corporate leadership experiences in Infosys and Google, and an entrepreneurial venture with Noetic Step. As we go into the panel dialogue, I just wanted to share with everybody that Melissa will be leaving at 11 a.m. So if there's certain questions that you want to put in for her, we will try to see if we can squeeze any of that in. But otherwise, I would like to kickstart today's session with the panel. So may I invite our panelists to turn on your videos. Thank you so much for being here with us. And the Qualtrics data showed that 44% of employees find it more productive working at home. I'm just curious to know what are your viewpoints on the advantages and disadvantages of flexible working arrangements in this crisis period, and how might it affect your organization's future working arrangements? Maybe I can turn the question first to Melissa.
Thank you, Shane. Well, I think the answers would apply differently for different people and different organizations. It really depends on the tools available to enable productivity, right? And I think more importantly, the individual situation of the employees, whether they have the conducive environment to be able to work from home or to be anywhere, any place, anytime. And which leads me to the culture. Culture of the organization is important. If it is empowering, where employees are trusted to deliver their work, no matter where they are, and the manager does not need to see them in person, then the flexible work arrangement model will serve their purpose. Yeah, so I think it all depends. Yeah, on the high level, those are the I call it preconditions for success. But in terms of the pluses and minuses of work from home arrangement, let's just touch on the work from home first, because FWA has multiple definitions of that. So for work from home, which apply to many of us as a result of COVID-19, I would say that that is probably the only option with all the restrictions around us, which means that for organizations, we have to make it work. to ensure that we continue to provide a smooth operation while enabling our employee to continue to deliver their work objectives. So in other words, we have no choice but to make it work. But but we have to be mindful that we take care of the employee well-being by doing so. Because of the massive transition, Steve talked about that at the beginning. It is not by choice, but it is really a necessity for us to adopt these practices. And I know in Singapore especially, the government has been very supportive, championing this for us. And as a result, we are now massively transitioned in an accelerated way to digital work and learning. So from a pluses, I would say we have no choice but to adapt, to be agile, and to make the best of it. But let's, as HR professionals, then what do we do if our organization is not yet ready for it? That's the part that we play, a role in leading the organization through the transition. So I'll stop here for the other speakers and panelists to share their thoughts as well.
Thank you, Melissa. Prasad and Justina, is there anything that you want to jump in here to share?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Great to be here. We've often spoken about the future of work, and that encompasses people, places, and practices. What we've seen with COVID is that it's acted as a catalyst, a change catalyst to accelerate changes in all these aspects. And, Steve's presentation was alluding to that as well. In fact, so much so that a recent World Economic Forum study mentioned that a whopping 98% of their respondents wanted to remote work for the rest of their lives. There are advantages and disadvantages, as is the case with a lot of situations. For me personally, if I look at it, the advantages are around flexible schedules, the fact that we don't have to commute, time with family if we manage time well, flexibility to work and possibly live in a location of choice. There are certain disadvantages as well, blurring lines between work and life, so you could see it either as a positive or a negative if an individual has challenges with unplugging. Lack of social interactions, collaboration, which is something that I find to be the biggest challenge, because I drive a lot of energy from my social interactions at work. There could be tech challenges, as I think Karina was mentioning just before we went live. There could be tech challenges. These serendipitous interactions and exchanges, which leads to idea generations, is another aspect that we miss out. And the vacation time. Oh, sorry, did I mention vacation? What's that? That's the situation that we are in. So, like Melissa just mentioned, I think it's a matter of values, how we value the employees, their voice, how we adapt and evolve our culture, everything coming together. So it's one thing to say, it's going to be a new normal, but I actually like the phrase new better, even better. I've often mentioned that we are going to be going through a series of current normals. Right? It's going to be a journey in a continuum. So we need to be just geared up for it.
Thank you, Prasad. Justina, is there something that you might want to add to the whole element of like empowerment, trust, and the values that have come up as like themes?
Justina, I think you're still on mute.
Sorry, Justina, we can't hear you at the moment.
I just mentioned tech challenges, didn't I?
Yeah. So I think one of the challenges that we have, of course, from working from home, or even like using technology, would be this. So perhaps for Justina sorting that out, I'm just going to quickly jump to this portion, right? Because we talk about empowerment and culture and trust. We've seen that in Qualtrics data that, employers in APJ have been doing a good job listening to its people. I'm just curious to know how our panelists have been reaching out to employees during this period of time and if they can share any more key initiatives that HR have changed or introduced since the beginning of COVID-19.
Yeah, I could do that.
Yeah. Can anybody hear?
Oh, okay. Justina is back.
Hi, Justina.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I heard. The last I heard was Prasad saying that tech challenges. Indeed, I had tech challenges today. Yeah, I'm sorry. I hopped out and hopped back in, but maybe I just wanted to add to what Shane was saying earlier, because we've actually gone out a big way to listen to our employees as well to get their feedback. So maybe on a lighter note, I echo what Melissa and Prasad have said. I think those are all very true. And interestingly, I think the point that our employees put through was that they felt that they were a whole lot more productive working from home. And when we tried to understand what they meant by being a lot more productive working from home, the funny thing was that it was because they could multitask. And the reality when we ran our workshops were, they said, and we have put out our hands, how many of you, while you're on a call, did other things? Help your children with schoolwork, fold your clothes, and did something else, and even like drive and pick up your kid from school. And all these things came through, and as a result of it, I think employees felt that as a result, they could achieve a lot more and be a lot more productive. And I think the reality for us when it hits us back is then that this is going to be the new way that I think employees will have certain expectations that they want to do. But I think there are trade-offs for us. So back to the downsides of that, I think Prasad mentioned about the blurring of the personal work life and social interactions. I think that's clearly the case. But maybe just one more point to add then, that the other issue that came through when we listened to employees was about performance management. How would performance be measured when you're working in a more virtual way? What does it mean in terms of the cadence of checking in with your ROs? Would your ROs be in the right position to sort of evaluate your work? Was some of the things that came through. And the joke was then that when we first went out, I think the ROs went out a big way, and the feedback came back to say that, hey guys, you are micromanaging, you're checking in on me too much. And then there was a balance of a cadence, and I think we reached a good cadence. And hearing from our employees, I think what they value is a check-in of about some once a week, some once in 2 weeks, and not too often. So those are some of the things that came through from our employees. Yeah. Sorry, back to you, Shane.
Thank you, Justina. I think performance management has always been something that has been on the minds as everyone struggled initially to move into like the work from home and trying to figure out like what was the best way to go about it. And as you mentioned about listening to employees, maybe this is where you can invite the panelists again to jump in. Like, how did you go about listening to employees? What were the key initiatives? You can even jump in to share like your own strategies to engage employees, or talking about this performance management piece.
Yeah, let me just share first. I really like what Justina just shared. In fact, she covered quite a bit, already. But for us in Kuok, we have decided to go back to basics, and that's important, especially in times of crisis. We need to provide certain compass for our employees as they navigate that uncertainty. So for us, because we have multiple industries, we have agri solutions where we have plants around the region. Employees in this sector were considered to be essential service, and we have to think about how do we continue to provide those operations, smooth running of operations amidst all the restrictions. The other was in retail. We have retail as well. So I'm sure many of you know that, while we were working from home, the one place that we always look forward to, especially for me, was the supermarket, because we need to get our food or unless you order all the time. So for our case, our business, we need to make sure that our employees' health and safety are continuously taken care of. We have service apartment, and they have to provide short, I would say, serve the SHN, for travelers coming in. So we are putting our employees on the front line. And we also have shipyards where we want to continue to be able to provide the essential service so ships can continue to move and carry cargoes. So all that became very real for us. And that became a number one priority for our organization, which is our people. We can talk about all the engagements and all that. But essentially, I think it's about health and safety, making sure that we care and give them the right amount of support for them. And we also have employees in Malaysia who shuttle to Singapore for work. And these are regular employees out there that we take for granted after a while. And as a result of the border restrictions, they were not able to come into work. They had to make a choice between family or work. And we decided that if family is something they cannot manage, they have to stay where they are at home in Malaysia. And we continue to pay them salary without question. So all these things, I would say it's down to taking care of what's most important for employees first. And then we talk about engagement. We started to focus on core values to help our employees think about how to manage stress. We talk about flexible work arrangement. We talk about the productivity and all that. But the reality is, I see my employees having to deal with multi-generational family situations at home, or the size of the home is not big enough for them to have a private corner to have a meeting, or they could be sharing the dining table with their spouse or with the children doing home-based learning. That's the reality of what we had to deal with. And it's not going to be easy. And therefore, compassion is the one thing that we show to our employees. And we also help them to manage by what we call the value of gratitude. When all else fail, think about the good things that you can still be thankful for. That you can have a dinner with your family every night, that you still have your family safe, at home. So that's something that we focus on, the total well-being, the mindfulness, and the positivity to get through it, while including those who have to be out there providing essential services. We need to make sure that they feel comfortable. So I'll stop here. There's a lot of engagement we do. We do a lot of care packages as well. So we were friends with Grab Food and all that, and we send surprise packages to show how much we care for employees. We do a lot of TGIF, we call it virtual TGIF, where drinks are served at home. Yes. So a lot of work that HR has stepped up, to show our employees that we care. And there are many ways we can do so. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. I just wanted to jump in and ask a question here, right? Which is that values is always something that is more conceptual, something that may not always be that easy to grasp. Like, what are some examples of specific initiatives that you took around these values to help your employees understand that and provide a compass?
Yeah. So what I decided to do is to anchor it myself. I decided that the leaders should lead by example, starting with our chairman. And my chairman is, not usually, I call it, he's quite camera shy, So to ask him to make a self-recording at home because we couldn't provide any services or support, a 2-3 minutes video to share his message to employees, to show how much we care and how much we're thinking about how do we navigate this, starting with gratitude, and then followed by all the other directors and senior members of the management team. And what I do is to anchor a conversation on each value every month. And this has been one of our most successful initiatives where, at least we got at any point in time, maximum 250 employees at one go, where we talk about each value in an hour. And we have a panel to discuss, to share our thoughts with regards to how do we navigate this? How do we bring to life each core value in our lives today at work and at home? Yeah.
Melissa, good initiative. And talking about values and even culture, I've heard from Justina and Prasad. They are very strong and passionate about this area too for their organization. Is there something that you want to share here in terms of how you have listened to your employers, the initiatives, and around this area?
Absolutely, Shin. Thank you. I'd definitely like to share a few examples of what we've been doing at GovTech. Before that, I just want to share that the global pandemic has created a burning platform for change, not only created a burning platform for change, but also tested and possibly strengthened resilience, adaptability, and the skill of being comfortable with uncomfortable. And I can't agree more with what Melissa just spoke about, compassion, gratitude, and in leaders showing the way and setting the tone about values. So for us, honest communication and engagement was and remains to be critical. And at GovTech, this has been the focal point of our leadership action. There are 3 examples that I want to share. All of these were engagements which typically could have happened in a physical form if we were not in the situation that we're in. First one, we called it a bold conversation. So ABC, it was a variant of ABC, our values. So GovTech's values are agility, being bold and collaborative. So we did a variant of that when we called it a bold conversation, where 2 senior leaders co-hosted an engagement with a group of about between 20 and 30 GovTechies, most of them who joined since early this year. Starting April, since we started Circuit Breaker, all the onboarding was virtual. Even for those people who joined in Jan, they had little exposure to the leaders. So we decided to meet all of them in a 90-minute conversation where we spoke about, GovTech heard their views about how they're settling in, what more could we do, etc. It goes back to the point that Steve was making about listening to them. The second one, this was a new initiative that we started. We called it the Home But Not Alone series. So this was a series of communication. This was by EDMs that leaders personally wrote, expressing care, showing solidarity, seeking inputs, and sharing more about the amazing work that our fellow GovTechies were involved in. And most importantly, also showing authenticity and vulnerability in sharing our practices, pet peeves about how we were managing our own lives, working from home, working remotely, interacting, engaging, and then, multitasking, going back to what Justina mentioned. The third one is something that we call leadership exchange. We usually do it with about 200 odd of our people managers. The second one this year, we actually designed to address the very challenges that we're talking about, which is around how do we engage and manage teams remotely. So we had some of our leaders share their personal experiences on matters such as how are they integrating the new hires, how are they virtually replacing the social interactions that I was talking about earlier, or how are they making sure that all their leaders were being coached and engaged regularly. And then we also followed it up when we announced what I call a wellness package, which included a reasonable dollar amount as a one-time payment to support for the wellness initiatives that we wanted, a holistic wellness approach that we wanted our GovTechies to focus on. We announced a 1-day recharge leave that they could take either on a day or 2 half days. And we've also announced a wellness assistance program that our employees can tap into. Essentially, I think it was all about setting the tone at the top and leaders actually showing solidarity, just not with their functions, but as a collective leadership team for GovTech. So those are the examples that I wanted to share.
Those are great examples, and that actually already answers one of the questions of one of what someone actually asked about allowance, right? Wellness allowance. Is this something that Justina, you would have in your organization, or if not, what are the other ways that you are handling this?
So we do have flexible work wellness credits. So for that, I think we've just gone out to announce to say that we allow a lot more flexibility. And I think in listening to our employees, I think some of them are just not set up properly at home and needed to buy equipment. I think one of the most outstanding cases that came through when they shared with us, they literally use an ironing board to use as a work table. And the employee was sharing that the maid wasn't very pleased because it got into the way of her schedule instead in terms of work. So we've gone out in terms of then allowing for a lot more of the claims to allow for work equipment and all that to be claimed. And also clearly because I think given this year as well, usually many of them actually claim for overseas travel as well, and that's not going to happen as well. So how might we then allow for flexibility in that manner? the other aspects of it also then that I think Prasad touched a lot on wellness. And wellness is another area that I think we do need to, besides the enablement piece, the wellness portion of it is one key portion that we would need to focus on. So for us, we've had to tighten our belts, including also having to take on some pay cuts and also announcing that expectations of the total package would have to be managed. And from the wellness perspective, besides the health, well-being aspects of this, we also focus a lot on mental and even financial wellness in the last couple of months. And that has been taken up quite well. We have found a lot of in-house talents, people who could do yoga, who could do Zumba, and they did online classes, and we managed to rally and got a lot of teams on board to actually do it even from home virtually. So we've tried different things. But taking a step back to the question once again, I think the important thing here, which I echoed the two earlier speakers, is about actually listening to your employees to understand their concern, putting forth a certain trust that when they bring forth a certain concern, it stems from their needs. And then it's not that they're just trying to be funny about it. And we have to recognize that it is about striking that particular balance. So in terms of listening, we've gone out a large way to do so. So we ran a circuit breaker pulse survey in April at that point, where things were going really crazy. And at that point, I think what was very heartening to hear was that a lot of the pieces in terms of work enablement was sorted. Work life was the major issue for us. And post that, I think when leaders, and back the second point then being the leadership walking the talk, leaders had to then take all their results and play back and engage their team around their results. And in that particular engagement, they also then committed to what are the actions that they were going to take forward. So for example, a lot of people reflected that meal times, having to work through lunch wasn't easy because they also had to take care of the needs of their family, even to cook lunch or even simply to go out and buy lunch. Dinner time was another major issue. Weekends was another issue. So then when leaders played back, and then they were a whole lot more sensitized to this and put forth their own commitment. And when playing this back to their team and putting forth their own commitment, you can almost be certain then that's something that they, having said it and played it back to their team, they actually carried through. So thankfully, I think our leaders took a step in that right direction. So it's not just about listening, but really the concrete action that follows, because that sends a very strong signal that employees have been listened to, their concerns are being addressed. So we're currently now embarking on the second series of focus group as well as surveys. We've just closed. We're doing visioning workshops of the new better, as you all call it, and listening again to employees in terms of what their expectations are. But in that journey, it's really about communication is two ways. Because while employees have what they want, it's about also helping them understand what are the trade-offs. And if anything, I think the last couple of weeks in engaging our employees through focus group and surveys is helping them understand that it's not a very one-dimensional, you just want to work from home because it works out for you. But rather from the organization, there are other aspects that we would also need to trade off. What were those trade-offs? And then if you were to have to consider this as a package, where do you put the dial? And I'm very thankful then that our employees, through the survey feedback, when they understand some of these trade-offs, they are actually making rather mature decisions. So again, it goes back to the trust and empowerment issue as well, to help them co-create with them on this journey. And it's not really about us just lending a one-way view to them.
Thank you, Justina. And at this point in time, I'm going to direct one question to Melissa before she drops off for her other meeting. One of the questions that has been asked to you, Melissa, is that what are the specific engagement events you organize when people are working from home?
Oh, plenty. I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, so let me share a little bit more. In fact, the first one that we did was not about work. It was really to just get in touch with people. And I love the way Justina shared her stories. She really brings to life a lot of good examples. So we did actually a few TGIFs. So we started off with Singapore, because we just want people to let their head down. We know it's already stressful enough, right? And we want to spend just an hour and a half with them. And guess what? That's the session where the leaders actually make fun of ourselves. We do TikTok videos and all that, and then we share with employees so they feel more relaxed around us as well. And we also reach out to our colleagues from around the world so they get to participate. We do a lot of free deliveries, meaning food or drinks, so that we can truly, enjoy the time out together. So that was actually one of the more popular ones. And then it got on bigger. So our senior leaders participated as well. And we just focus on just bonding together. Yeah, I think the bonding is important, whether you're not in person or not. And with technology, we were able to do that. The other thing we did was what I shared earlier, the videos and leadership conversations, something similar to what Prasad has shared. We call it the Leaders in Conversation. In fact, this afternoon, I'm hosting one in the same role as you do as a moderator. But it's fun. Why? Because it really got our leaders to think about what each value means to them. And they get to interact with employees in a live Q&A. And that's where we get a sense of what's on employees' mind. There are many ways to get feedback. Focus group, employee survey, pulse survey, or you do a sessions like this with live Q&A. The key thing is about to create a safe space for employees to ask any kind of questions, right? And for us as leaders to really be there, to listen and to engage. And even if we don't have the answers, let them know, because these are new normal, and we want to get to new better, right? And to be able to get to new better, everybody has to put in their fair share. And that's the message that we've shared with our population. Yeah, we are leaders, but we don't have all the answers. In fact, we find answers in our engagement with our people, right? And I think Justina shared beautifully, the stories at home. Yeah, and we face similar situations. So how do we know if we don't engage with our people? And there are many channels to do that. And I'm just reaching out to all of you because I know each of us have different settings. Some may be fortunate enough to have the right platform and culture to be able to take it forward. Then I encourage all of you to move along and lead into the future. But if your company is still figuring out what to do, then lean on the sharing here to see, what you can do and start small. Don't try and tackle everything. What we did was to try one thing, and then when we see the response from employees, we do more. That's what I always tell my employees. We can always do a lot of things for you in HR, but if you don't appreciate or you don't participate or if you don't find it useful, let us know, right? And if it is useful, then participate, and we will do more for you. And that's the kind of relationship, open, collaborative, and community driven. I totally believe that the future is community driven because the world is quite complex now. Yeah, and I don't think HR has all the answers, but for us to be able to navigate forward, we need to lean on one another, share our views, and learn from one another so we don't make the mistakes. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for that words of wisdom and sharing with us what the future would look like.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We know that. Yeah, we need.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to go. Yeah, but I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of this event, and I'm sure both Prasad and Justina will be able to share a lot more with you. And I look forward to the opportunity next time again. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
All right.
And Justina, Prasad, and even Steve, right? When we having heard from Melissa about what the future would be, she mentioned it's going to be a lot more communication, collaboration, community-driven, open. What would you? Let's say we look at crystal ball thinking, right? Thinking 3 years down the track or in the future, how do you see that changing, the workplace changing post-COVID-19 for you? What might that new better look like for your workplace, for your employees, and so on? And Steve, if you like.
Yeah, I think so. I might jump in there first, but because I think you can get some great examples of each of the companies, and the panelists have given some great, colourful examples there. And I think when I look 3 years down the track, if I could make this accurate, I'm going to buy a bunch of shares, but I doubt that's going to be the case. I think what we're going to find is employee listening, if I think about from just an EX perspective, right? We've got to get back to the basics, which is we need to be able to listen to our people. We need to be able to do that on scale, and we need to be able to personalize it. So I think in 3 years from now, we're definitely going to see the same way we interact with consumers around understanding their expectation will be around our employees. So accepting employees in the moment, not an additional part to their task. And we'll be getting that feedback that will allow us then to act and create these amazing, colorful stories that we've got there, and then close that loop or then open up more actions that's required. And I think that we'll see as a result of this catalyst or this accelerant that COVID's created is this new way of expectations around what people expect from their employees and the way they listen and create that two-way conversation in a digital forum, not just in a one-to-one scale of conversation. Because unfortunately, as much as we'd love to be able to do that, if your organization's got 10,000 people, you won't be able to do that on scale. And so that's going to be the critical thing. And the last thing I'll also add to that, and I'd be interested in the panelists around this, is just the workplace flexibility is the big thing that we'll see that's changed. Because if you think about the reason why the workplace 9 to 5 hours were created, it was created in the days where we used to have factories and we as people were widgets in that factory. And you had to be there on time for the factory to operate, right? The machine to operate because you were part of the machine. Right now, we don't have that anymore. And we can use this time as a catalyst to transform what does it look like to be a flexible working remote, team collaborations and all that sort of interesting ways to work different. So I'm looking forward to the new better. That's going to be happening very soon.
Shane, if I can quickly jump in and share my thoughts in 2 dimensions. One, when we are looking into the future, not necessarily crystal balling here, but just being completely practical. I see certain changes that will happen along 2 dimensions. One is the role of a leader, and 2, the role of our function, human resources. So I just want to share a couple of thoughts on both. I think what we are seeing now and what it will continue to be is going to be an ultimate test of leadership. The pressures are definitely daunting. The leaders will have to shape a purpose-led culture that's aligned with business strategies and inspires a remote, diverse, and distributed workforce more than ever. 4 things that I believe a leader should be doing is to communicate openly, and then just adding to what Melissa just said, even if we do not have the answers. The second one is the ability to act decisively. The third one is to listen to the users, be it customers, be it employees, and adapt quickly. And 4 is just be there for the teams, right? So the way I look at it, as a function, HR has a huge role to influence in strengthening the focus of that we already have an engagement. We've seen, from the study that Steve shared and from all the sharing so far, that progressive organizations, the importance of engagement is not a question at all. And I think we need to influence for stronger leadership voice and sponsorship there. And that's the role that I see HR play. The second aspect, which comes as a package with it, is we often talk about KPIs and how do we manage these during these times and when everyone is working remotely, etc. I'm of the strong view that we are moving into a phase where trust, exhibiting trust unequivocally is going to be very crucial. It's not as much about cast in stone KPIs. It's really about trusting everybody to be responsible for what they need to do while having an overview around the KPIs of the organization. So that approach is going to be definitely shifting. So what does it mean for an HR practitioner? If I'm looking at some skills that we need to build, if we already aren't working on it, one is the ability to manage change in times of ambiguity. The second one is to be able to influence senior management to operate with first principles and actually do it ourselves as well. And then the third one is being agile. And then one of my favorite things is I've always said that we should do away with rule books. Rule books are not our friends. It's really the users that we interact with. So the employees and their voice should be our guiding light and not the rule book anymore. So I think that's really what I wanted to share in terms of what I see changing and will be required in the future.
Thank you, Prasad. And what are your own thoughts, Justina?
Yeah, just adding on, I think they've already shared a lot. So just adding on, I echo Steve's point and that I think the future going ahead would be a lot more digital, mixed type of work environment, and also a focus on user experience in terms of how do we actually personalize. And we believe that, so for each of us, I guess the question is, how might we actually drive that particular change? And while we think about the physical workspace is as much as the digital workspace, and how might these be the enablers to build the kind of culture that we want to build. Completely echo Prasad's point in that manner. I believe that the work, as Melissa said, is a lot more complex, and this means that going ahead, it requires we don't have all the answers. It requires a lot more collaboration. Trust, I think, is the fundamental that underpins this aspect of it. And the way I see it is then that the way we think about performance management also has to shift. I think they are able to draft a good outcome KPI if you know what is where you're headed and exactly what's the final end product. But I believe that in a very complex environment going ahead, you're not going to be able to define so concretely that end product. What does that mean for us then? Then it's really about changing the way we work. We sort of say it's agile. Really, it's also about iteration. Not being perfect, but getting better each step of the way. And with iteration, that means that you cannot define a final end outcome KPI. But really, each step of the way is about how might we actually add value? How do you then measure that kind of collaboration, people being team players, adding value in this thing? Nobody has all the answers, and I think that's the reality. We as leaders need to be comfortable to go out there and say this. In many of my team communication, especially in the initial portions of it, when people had a lot of concerns, as leaders, how might we tell them that, look, we don't know, we cannot predict, but what do we then focus on? What is the next step that we need to take? How might you then assure people? So around this, I guess it's about HR practitioners thinking about how might we actually drive new behaviors and mindset while retaining our organizational identity. This is actually an opportunity for us where we can actually play a bigger role in thinking this through. And much as we say a lot of things, I think mindset and the underpinning of it is also rather important. So one of the things that we did very early on when we also launched this was we were in the midst of also launching growth mindset. So we actually then curated a video where we showed through experience of how do you then have, are you trying to survive this pandemic or are you trying to thrive in this new normal? And the mindset that you apply to it is really quite different. So if you're just trying to survive it, all you're trying to do is, I just need to get through this, right? I just have to wait. How long is it going to last? I don't know. Maybe 1 month we'll get back to the new normal. And that's actually all our initial response. When can I get back to the office? When can I get back to the office that the world that I was familiar with? We kind of think of COVID as an on-off button. The moment that it's off, we go back to our lives as how we know it. But you will realize that that's not how it's going to be. So in this new things where people are just thrown into this, then how do you actually thrive? How do you then view it? What is the mindset that you want to adopt? If you then view it to say that there are a lot of opportunities for us to capitalize at this point in time, which there is, then how do we then quickly capitalize on all these and do better, right? And that's where you actually start moving into the mindset of where you're trying to be thriving, not surviving. And then that particular mindset will set you up for change. And I believe that that kind of mindset is also very important for us going ahead.
Thank you so much. I hear we have a lot of themes that have surfaced, which is like on trust, collaboration, openness, and just that ability to be vulnerable and tell people that, you know what, we don't have all the answers, but let us take on that growth mindset to say we're going to thrive and we're going to figure out as it comes along. But one of the fundamental questions that some of us might have right now before we can get to that is, if we want to listen to our employees more, what's the best way to go about that today? Because currently an audience actually said we send emails to them, but it's becoming like it's swarming their inbox. So how can we deal with that to engage our employees?
I'll probably share a quick view, and then I'm sure Steve and Justina might have. For me, the platform doesn't matter. It's again, I'll go back to Justina's point about mindset. It's the intent that matters. So I could do it in a one-on-one, I could do it in a focus group, I could do it in an email survey, I can use Qualtrics. It could be any, but it's starting off with the right intent to actually be doing it and to make sure that we are taking their insights for real action. So that's how I would look at it.
Yeah, let me add to that. I agree. I think it's the intent is the first part, and being very clear on where you want to go with that feedback. So whether that feedback is in that just one-on-one personal part, or is it doing it on scale where you're reaching out to all your organization or part of the organization to understand. And I think the really key one with this is it's one thing to listen, but if all you do is listen, you're kind of treating it like a gym membership, in that it's great to have it, but if you do nothing with it, you're not going to get muscle growth. You're not going to get weight loss. So you need to go and action off the back of it. Go and do now know that you haven't just listened, you've heard. And by hearing and actioning, you're going to get more feedback. You're going to build this great two-way culture of listening and action, and people are going to go and grow and transform. And you're going to achieve all those great strategic intents you want on this journey towards a new better.
Thank you so much. Oh, Justina, did you want to say something?
No, it's okay. Yeah. So I completely echo Steve's point, because I think sincerity comes from acting on the feedback, because true listening isn't just listening to respond, but really listening first to understand. And when you understand, then how do you then take this and take it forward? Sometimes people worry about employee expectations, thinking that they can't meet it. But if you were to trust your employees, there are times where you can't do what they want. And the reality is HR is not here to make sure that everybody's, whatever they want, we kind of like do it. So there are many instances then that we actually can't. But in those can't, then the question is again, back to the communication. Do you then go back and explain why you can't? And more often than not, I think you'll be surprised to find that, yeah, they may not like the answer, but I think they appreciate the consideration. And also even the simple fact that they've heard and you've considered is actually something that matters to them as well. So those are some of the thoughts that I leave with the community.
Thank you so much. And I guess just to sum up our discussion for today, what strikes me is that I think to be able to navigate this change for the future as well, it really brings us to becoming even more human, going back to the real basics of being human to address like this change moving forward. So thank you so much, Justina, Steve, and Prasad. I'm handing the time back over to you, Karina.
Thank you, Shane, and for helping us moderate this engaging discussion. I want to echo Shane's thanks to all our esteemed speakers, Melissa, Justina, Prasad, and Stephen. Also, a big thank you, I think, to the Qualtrics team, Hui Min, working in the background to help us, prepare for this. So I think we are flashing the QR code for the feedback form right now on screen. So if you could really just help us out, provide us some webinar feedback suggestions. We will try to act on it for future webinars. And I know that there were questions coming in that unfortunately we were not able to answer. What we will do is we'll collate it, and then we will work with the speakers to try and get you your answers that we will send out through a follow-up email. So thank you once again to the 280 plus of you who dialed in this morning to join us. We greatly appreciate, and we hope that you took something away back. So enjoy a scrumptious lunch and have a fabulous afternoon ahead. Thank you. Bye.
Fantastic.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.